The screens across Earth went dark at exactly noon. Every television, every computer, every phone showed the same thing. A face appeared. It was not human. The creature had scales like a lizard, eyes that glowed red, and teeth sharp as knives. This was High Commander Vekthar of the Draknir Empire. His voice was cold and hard. He spoke slowly so everyone could understand. The message was simple. Earth had 72 hours to surrender. If humanity refused, the Draknir fleet would destroy every city, every town, every village. They would burn the oceans and crack the mountains. Nothing would survive. The transmission ended. The screens went back to normal. For a moment, the whole world was silent. Then the screaming began. Captain Tae-Yang stood in the command center of Earth's defense fleet. He was a soldier trained for war, but as he looked at the numbers on his screen, his hands shook. The Draknir had 10,000 warships. Earth had 200. The computer had run the battle simulation 50 times. Earth lost every single time. Most simulations showed Earth's fleet destroyed in less than 3 hours. His second officer spoke quietly. She asked what they should do. Tae-Yang had no answer. He had trained his whole life to protect Earth. Now he realized his training meant nothing. The enemy was too strong. Around the world, people ran. In New York, millions tried to leave the city at once. The roads jammed with cars. In Tokyo, people gathered in temples to pray. In London, the government buildings emptied as officials fled to bunkers. In Mumbai, families held each other and cried. Fear spread like a disease. But in a hidden facility deep beneath the Himalayan mountains, one woman stayed calm. Ambassador Ji-woo sat alone in a room carved from solid rock. She was 47 years old and had gray in her hair. She had been Earth's lead diplomat for 20 years. She had also been keeping secrets for just as long. In front of her sat a strange object. It looked like a crystal, but it glowed with its own light. Colors moved inside it like liquid. This crystal was not from Earth. Ji-woo had found it 27 years ago on Europa, one of Jupiter's moons. She had been young then, just starting her career. The crystal had been buried in ice for thousands of years. When she touched it, the crystal had shown her pictures. Mathematical symbols, star maps, a puzzle. Ji-woo spent 17 years solving that puzzle, 17 years working in secret. Her friends thought she was crazy. Her family worried about her, but she could not stop. The puzzle meant something important. She knew it in her bones. When she finally solved it, the crystal sang. That was the only way to describe the sound it made. And across the galaxy, someone heard that song. Now as the world panicked above her, Ji-woo touched the crystal again. She entered 3 sets of coordinates. 3 locations in deep space. 3 messages sent to 3 different friends. Friends that Earth's governments did not know existed. Friends that Ji-woo had made during decades of secret missions. She sent the messages. Then she waited. 48 hours passed. 2 full days. The Draknir fleet came closer. Telescopes could see them now. Thousands of dark shapes moving through space. Earth's leaders met constantly but could not agree on anything. Some wanted to surrender. Others wanted to fight and die with honor. A few wanted to run, to send colony ships away and hope some humans would survive. Captain Tae-Yang did not sleep. He stayed in the command center, watching the Draknir approach. His officers asked him for orders. He told them to prepare for battle. What else could he say? But in his heart he knew it was hopeless. Then with only 24 hours left, something changed. The sensors began to scream. Every alert on every screen turned red. A young officer shouted that they were detecting something at the edge of the solar system. Not one thing. 3 things. 3 massive energy signatures appearing from nowhere. Tae-Yang ran to the main display. What he saw made no sense. The energy readings were impossible. They showed power levels that should not exist. One signature was pure light, bright as a star. Another was organic, living tissue spread across millions of kilometers. The third burned with heat from the core of a volcano. An old scientist named Dr. Hana was called to the command center. She was 34 but looked older, tired from years of research that no one understood. She studied ancient alien languages and dead civilizations. Most people thought her work was useless. But when she saw the sensor readings, her hands began to shake. She knew these signatures. She had seen them in old texts, in fragments of stories from species that died long ago. These were the energy patterns of the ancients, the ones who came before, the ones who built the first starships when Earth was still covered in ice. She whispered 3 names. The Velshari, The Thornwood Collective, the Ashbourne clans. Everyone thought these species were legends, stories told to children. No one had seen them in thousands of years. Most scientists believed they were extinct or had never existed at all, but Dr. Hana knew better. She had spent her career proving they were real. She had decoded their languages. She had found their ruins on dead worlds, and she had worked with Ambassador Jiwoo to find them. Now they were here. The first to fully appear was the Velshari world ship. It looked like a mountain made of crystal and light. It was so large that it had its own gravity. The ship did not look built. It looked grown like a living thing. Energy flowed through it in patterns that hurt to watch. The second arrival was stranger still. The Thornwood Collective came through a tear in space itself. They were not a ship. They were a forest. A living forest floating in the vacuum of space. Massive trees with bark like metal. Roots that stretched between them, connecting everything. Leaves that glowed with soft green light. The whole thing pulsed like a heartbeat. The third made everyone step back from their screens. The Ashbourne fleet emerged from points of fire. Their ships looked like they were carved from volcanic rock. Heat radiated from them. You could see it distorting space. And on those ships stood warriors. Even through the cameras, even across millions of kilometers, you could feel their presence. These were beings born for war. Captain Tae-yang could not speak. His mind could not process what he was seeing. These three groups alone had more power than the entire Draknir fleet. Where had they come from? Why were they here? His communications officer received a message. It came from Ambassador Jiwoo. She was requesting an immediate meeting with the United Earth Council. She said it was time to tell the truth. 6 hours later, the council gathered. Leaders from every nation sat in a secure bunker. They were angry and confused. The world was ending, and now this strange woman was telling them to wait. Jiwoo stood before them, calm as still water. She told them everything. How she found the crystal. How she solved the puzzle. How she made contact with the Velshari 30 years ago. How Earth had been quietly helping these ancient peoples for decades, saving their worlds, protecting their secrets, asking nothing in return. The council members shouted at her. They called her a traitor. They said she had no right to make such decisions alone. One man demanded she be arrested. Jiwoo waited for them to finish. Then she spoke one sentence that made the room go quiet. She said humanity was not alone anymore. 3 ancient civilizations had come to stand with Earth, not because of a treaty, not because of trade or politics, but because humans had helped them when they needed it most. Because humans had shown them kindness, because humans had become their friends. In space above Earth, the 3 ancient fleets positioned themselves between the planet and the approaching Draknir. They said nothing. They sent no messages. They simply waited. On his flagship, High Commander Vekthar stared at his screens. His claws dug into the armrests of his command chair. This was not supposed to happen. Earth was alone, weak, easy prey. But now 3 ancient powers had appeared from nowhere. His analysts were running scared. The energy readings made no sense. These were forces that should not exist. For the first time in his military career, Vekthar felt something he had never expected to feel. Fear. The first meeting took place on a small station between Earth and the Moon. Ambassador Jiwoo walked through the corridors with Captain Tae-yang beside her. He kept his hand on his weapon. He trusted no one. They entered a large room. What Tae-yang saw there made him stop. In the center of the room floated a being made of pure crystal. It was shaped like a person but had no face. Light moved through it like blood through veins. This was Elder Thos of the Velshari. To the left stood something that looked like a tree but walked and moved like a person. Its bark was silver. Its eyes were green flames. This was Matriarch Kess of the Thornwood Collective. She spoke without words, using chemical signals that Dr. Hana's device translated into sound. To the right stood Warlord Grix of the Ashbourne. He was 3 meters tall. His skin looked like cooled lava, black and red with cracks that glowed orange. When he breathed, smoke came from his mouth. His voice sounded like grinding rocks. Jiwoo bowed to each of them. She thanked them for coming. Elder Thos spoke first. His voice was like music, high and clear. He said the Velshari had been sleeping for 10,000 years. They had seen too many young species destroy themselves. They had decided to sleep until a wise species appeared. When Jiwoo solved their puzzle, the Velshari knew they had found what they were looking for. It took her 17 years to solve a problem that had no guarantee of reward. That showed patience. That showed wisdom. That showed humanity was different. Captain Taeyang listened but struggled to believe. These beings were speaking of events from before human civilization existed. They had waited thousands of years, and they woke up because of a puzzle? It seemed crazy. Matriarch Kess spoke next. Her translated voice was warm like sunlight. She told the story of how humans saved her people. 30 years ago, the Thornwood Collective's home star began to die. Their whole species depended on that star. Without it, every Thornwood across the galaxy would wither and die. Earth's first deep space mission found them. The humans could have taken anything they wanted. The Thornwood were too weak to resist. But instead, human scientists worked for 7 years to stabilize the dying star. They asked for nothing. They simply helped because it was right. The Thornwood never forgot. Their species shares memories across light years. Every Thornwood in the galaxy knows the story of human kindness. When Jiwoo called for help, millions of Thornwood answered. Warlord Grix spoke last. His story was more personal. The Draknir Empire had enslaved his people. They forced the Ashborn to work in zones of deadly radiation. No other species could survive there, but the Ashborn were born in fire. They could endure what would kill others. The Draknir worked the adult Ashborn to death and left their eggs to burn in a collapsing star system. Major Yuna led a rescue mission. She was a special operations commander, trained for impossible tasks. She took her team into hell itself to save those eggs. 3 of her team died in that mission, but they saved 500 eggs. Those eggs hatched. Those children grew. Now the Ashborn had a future again. Grix himself was one of those saved children. He owed his life to humans he never met. Taeyang felt his throat tighten. He had not known any of this. Earth's government had kept these missions secret. He had been defending humanity without knowing what humanity truly was. These stories showed something he never expected. Humans were not special because they were strong. They were special because they cared. Meanwhile, on his flagship, High Commander Vekthar held an emergency meeting. His officers argued loudly. The intelligence reports made no sense. Their databases listed the Velshari as extinct for 10,000 years. The Thornwood were supposed to be myths. The Ashborn should have died out decades ago. But all 3 were here. All 3 were real. And all 3 were protecting Earth. Counselor Mira stood in the corner of the room. She was Vekthar's political rival. She had always thought his aggressive expansion was foolish. Now she saw a chance. She suggested they negotiate. They had no information about these new enemies. Fighting blind was suicide. Vekthar slammed his fist on the table. He refused to show weakness. The Draknir Empire never retreated, never negotiated, but inside doubt was growing. He had built his career on being stronger than everyone else. What happened when you met someone stronger? Back on Earth, news of the meeting spread quickly. People gathered around screens to watch. The fear was still there, but now something else mixed with it. Hope. Maybe Earth was not alone. Maybe they had a chance. Dr. Hana worked constantly in her laboratory. She was translating communications between the 3 ancient species. Each one spoke differently. The Velshari used pure mathematics. The Thornwood used chemical signals. The Ashborn used a language of heat and pressure, but somehow they all understood each other. And they all understood humans. This surprised Hana. She had expected communication to be difficult. Instead, it was easy, natural, as if they had been friends for years instead of meeting for the first time. She realized something important. These species had been watching humanity for a long time. They had studied human culture. They had learned human languages. They had done this because they wanted to, because they cared about the strange species that helped others without expecting reward. Major Yuna met privately with Warlord Grix. She felt uncomfortable. The mission to save the Ashborn eggs had haunted her for years. She remembered her 3 teammates who died. Their names and faces visited her dreams. She carried their memory like a weight. Grix looked at her with eyes like burning coals. He told her that the Ashborn remember the dead. He said the 3 humans who died were now part of Ashborn history. They were honored in songs sung by Ashborn children across multiple worlds. Their sacrifice would never be forgotten. Then Grix did something unexpected. He sang. His voice was deep and rumbling. The words were in the Ashbourne language, but Una understood the meaning. It was a song of heroes, a song of those who gave everything for others. And in that song she heard 3 human names. Tears ran down Una's face. For the first time since that mission, she felt the weight lift. Her friends had not died for nothing. They lived on in the memory of an entire species. That was immortality of a kind. The deadline from Vekthar's ultimatum came and went. The Draknir fleet stopped advancing. They held position just beyond Mars, neither attacking nor retreating. The ancient fleet stayed between them and Earth, silent guardians. The whole galaxy watched. News had spread across thousands of light years. Species that humanity had never met knew what was happening. Everyone wanted to see what would happen next. Would there be war? Would the Draknir retreat? Would Earth survive? Then a message came from Vekthar. He demanded a face-to-face meeting. Not on a human station, not in space controlled by the ancient species. On neutral ground, a place where the whole galaxy could watch. Ambassador Jiwoo considered the demand carefully. Captain Tae-yang argued against it. He said it was a trap. The Draknir were known for treachery. Elder Thos warned that Vekthar was desperate, and desperate beings were dangerous. But Jiwoo saw opportunity. She said yes, with one condition. The meeting must be broadcast live across every communications network in the galaxy. Every species must see and hear everything that happened. No secrets, no hidden deals. Vekthar agreed. Perhaps he thought he could use the public stage to his advantage. Perhaps he thought words were a battlefield he could win. Perhaps he simply had no choice. A neutral space station called Nexus was chosen. It belonged to no one species. It was a trading hub where all kinds of beings met. Now it would host the most important meeting in galactic history. Jiwoo prepared carefully. She chose her delegation with purpose. She brought scientists, artists, and teachers. She brought a young student named Boram who had won an essay contest about peace between species. She brought people who represented the best of humanity. Tae-yang prepared differently. He brought soldiers. He studied the station's layout. He planned escape routes and defensive positions. He would protect Jiwoo with his life if necessary. The day of the meeting arrived. Ships from both sides approached Nexus Station. The whole galaxy held its breath. What happened next would decide the future. Would it be war or peace? Would humanity survive or perish? As Jiwoo's ship docked at the station, she looked at Earth through the window. Her home. The blue planet that had given birth to a species crazy enough to help strangers, smart enough to make friends across the stars, brave enough to stand up to an empire. She whispered a prayer to no one in particular. Then she stepped onto the station to change the galaxy forever. The conference hall on Nexus Station was enormous. It had to be. Representatives from hundreds of species had come to watch. Some looked like plants. Some looked like machines. Some looked like nothing from Earth's imagination. They filled the viewing galleries, all eyes on the center stage. The Draknir delegation arrived first. High Commander Vekthar led 50 officers in perfect military formation. Their armor gleamed. Their weapons were visible. They wanted everyone to see their strength. Vekthar sat at the negotiation table with the posture of someone who expected to win. Then the human delegation entered. The contrast shocked everyone watching. Ambassador Jiwoo wore simple clothes. Behind her walked scientists carrying data pads, teachers holding books, artists with their tools. And in the middle of the group, a 12-year-old girl named Boram, Captain Tae-yang, and his soldiers came last. They wore light armor and carried weapons, but they stayed at the back. This was not their battle. This was Jiwoo's moment. The ancient species had representatives too. Elder Thos floated near the ceiling, his crystal body catching every light. Matriarch Kess stood like a silver tree in the corner. Warlord Grix positioned himself behind the human delegation, his massive form a promise of protection. The mediator called the meeting to order. Cameras from 1,000 worlds recorded every moment. Vekthar stood to speak first. His voice boomed through the hall. He spoke of the natural order of the galaxy. The strong rule. The weak submit. This had always been the way. He said Earth was a young species, primitive. They had barely reached their own moon when the Draknir already controlled 47 star systems. Earth had no right to deny the Empire. Resistance was pointless. Their new allies changed nothing. The Draknir would take what they wanted, as they always had. His words were powerful. Many species in the gallery nodded. This was the way the galaxy worked. Power decided everything. Vecthar sat down, confident he had won the argument before it even started. Jiwoo stood. She did not raise her voice. She did not threaten. She simply started telling stories. She told about Dr. Hana, who spent 17 years solving a puzzle with no promise of reward. 17 years of her life dedicated to understanding someone else's message. Not for money, not for power, just because the puzzle existed and deserved to be solved. She told about the human scientists who worked 7 years to save a dying star. They had never met the Thornwood Collective. They gained nothing from saving them. But they worked anyway because a species was dying and they could help. She told about Major Yuna and her team. How they flew into a collapsing star system to save eggs that were not even their own species. How 3 humans died so that 500 Ashborn children could live. Each story came with proof, videos, scientific records, messages from the species involved. Jiwoo was not asking anyone to trust her. She was showing them the truth. The gallery grew quiet. This was not what they expected. They thought this would be about military strength, about threats and counter-threats. Instead, they were hearing about kindness, about sacrifice, about a species that measured success not in conquered worlds but in lives saved. Elder Thoth spoke next. His musical voice filled the hall. He said the Velshari had watched 1,000 civilizations rise and fall. They had seen species destroy themselves with war. They had seen species collapse from greed. They had seen species fade into nothing because they forgot how to care about others. The Velshari chose to sleep because they were tired of watching death. But they woke for humanity because humanity was different. Humans built bridges instead of walls. They asked questions instead of making demands. They helped without expecting payment. Matriarch Kess spoke through her translator. Her voice was warm as sunlight through leaves. She said the Thornwood Collective shares all memories. Every Thornwood in the galaxy knows what humans did for them. They came to Earth not because of an alliance, not because of politics. They came because you do not abandon friends. Warlord Grick stepped forward. His massive body made the floor shake. He looked directly at Vecthar. He said the Ashborn were dying under Draknir rule. Slaves working in radiation that killed slowly and painfully, their children left to burn in dying stars. Then humans came, strangers who owed the Ashborn nothing. They risked everything to save Ashborn eggs. 3 humans died doing it. Those 3 are honored in every Ashborn home. Their names are taught to every Ashborn child. They are heroes of a species not their own. Vecthar shifted in his seat. This was not going as planned. He had expected to dominate through force. Instead, he was being buried under evidence of human goodness. And he had no counter-argument. The Draknir Empire had conquered. It had taken. It had destroyed. But it had never helped anyone. Then something unexpected happened. Young Boram raised her hand. The mediator looked surprised but allowed her to speak. The 12-year-old girl walked to the center of the hall. She looked very small next to the massive aliens around her. She looked directly at Vecthar. Her voice was clear and steady. She asked a simple question. If you destroy us, who will remember your people with kindness? The question hung in the air. Vecthar stared at the human child. In all his years of military service, through all his conquests, no one had ever asked him that. Who would remember the Draknir with kindness? He thought about the 47 systems his empire controlled. They remembered the Draknir with fear, with hate, with the desire for revenge. Not one species loved them. Not one species would miss them if they disappeared tomorrow. The Ashborn sang songs about 3 dead humans. The Thornwood shared memories of human scientists working to save them. The Velshari woke from 10,000 years of sleep because one human solved their puzzle. What songs would anyone sing about the Draknir? Counselor Mira stood suddenly. She had been quiet until now, but she saw her chance. She announced that she had important information. Information that changed everything. She revealed that the Draknir homeworld was dying. Not from war. Not from invasion. The planet itself was sick. The oceans were turning toxic. The atmosphere was slowly becoming poison. Scientists predicted total collapse in less than 200 years. The Draknir military leadership had kept this secret. They feared panic. They feared looking weak, so they pushed for expansion, conquering new worlds, looking for a new home. But they never told their people the truth. The gallery exploded with noise. Species shouted questions. Draknir officers looked shocked. Some had not known. Vekthar's face showed rage, but also something else. The secret was out. There was no hiding it now. Jiwoo waited for the noise to die down. Then she made an offer that stunned everyone. She said Earth and its allies would help save the Draknir homeworld. Dr. Hana stepped forward with her research. She explained that the Draknir planet showed signs of ancient terraforming gone wrong. The Velshari might have the knowledge to fix it. The Thornwood could help restore the ecology. Humans could coordinate the effort. It would take decades. It would require resources from multiple worlds. But it was possible. The Draknir homeworld could be saved. Vekthar stood slowly. His officers watched him, waiting for orders. The whole galaxy watched him, waiting to see what he would do. He had spent his entire life believing that strength meant domination. That victory meant crushing your enemies. But now he faced a different kind of strength. A strength that offered help instead of threats. A strength that saved instead of destroyed. And he realized something painful. His way of life had brought the Draknir to the edge of extinction. Maybe there was another way. He looked at his officers. He looked at the ancient species who had come to defend Earth. He looked at the human delegation with their scientists and teachers and one 12-year-old girl. And he made a decision that would echo through history. Vekthar ordered his fleet to stand down. The hall erupted. Some species cheered. Some protested. Some could not believe what they just witnessed. The Draknir Empire, terror of the galaxy, had backed down without firing a shot. Jiwoo stood and extended her hand to Vekthar. He looked at it for a long moment. In Draknir culture, showing your hand to someone meant trust. It meant vulnerability. He had never done it with an enemy before. Slowly, he reached out and took her hand. The cameras captured the moment. Two leaders from different worlds, different species, different philosophies, shaking hands while the galaxy watched. The war that everyone expected never happened. Instead, something new was born. A partnership. A chance for change. A hope that maybe the galaxy could be different. But as Jiwoo would soon learn, changing a galaxy was much harder than stopping a war. 3 months after the meeting at Nexus Station, Dr. Hana stood on the surface of the Draknir homeworld. The sky was wrong. It should have been blue, but it was gray-green. The ocean in the distance was black. The trees nearby were bare and dying. This planet was sick. Her team worked around her. Human scientists alongside Velshari analysts and Thornwood botanists. They had set up equipment to study the soil, the air, the water. Every test showed the same thing. The planet was poisoned deep in its core. A young Draknir scientist named Thren approached her. He was different from other Draknir. Curious instead of aggressive. He wanted to learn instead of conquer. He had been assigned as Hana's assistant, but he was becoming something more. A friend, Thren asked what she had found. Hana showed him the readings. The planet had been terraformed thousands of years ago using Velshari technology. But something went wrong. The systems that were supposed to maintain the planet had failed. Now they were slowly killing it instead. The good news was that Elder Thos knew how to reverse it. The bad news was that it would take decades and require resources from dozens of worlds. One species could not do it alone. This would be a test of cooperation on a scale never before attempted. Meanwhile, not all Draknir accepted the peace. General Karn led a faction of military hardliners. They saw Vekthar's decision to stand down as betrayal. They believed accepting help from humans was shameful. They wanted war, even if it meant destruction. Karn made his move suddenly. He seized control of a battle group. 50 warships loyal to him broke formation and surrounded the Draknir capital. He arrested Vekthar and declared himself the new High Commander. His first order was to restart hostilities with Earth. The news reached Major Yuna while she was training with Ashborn warriors. She had been teaching them human combat techniques, while they taught her their fireborn fighting style. When she heard about the coup, her first instinct was to let the Draknir solve their own problems. Vekthar had threatened to destroy Earth. Why save him? But Warlord Grix put a massive hand on her shoulder. He said this was bigger than personal feelings. The peace was more important than revenge. If Karn succeeded, all the work would be for nothing. Thousands would die. Maybe millions. Yuna knew he was right. She gathered her team, human special forces and Ashborn warriors. They planned a rescue mission together. It would be dangerous. Karn's forces controlled the capital, but they had surprise on their side. And they had each other. Captain Tae Yang commanded the Space Forces protecting the rescue team. He had formed an unlikely partnership with a Draknir officer named Vex. The two of them shared a warrior's mentality. They understood each other even though they had been enemies months ago. Vex asked Tae Yang why humans fought so hard for peace. In Draknir culture, strength came from victory in battle. But humans seemed to think strength came from avoiding battle. It made no sense to him. Tae Yang explained that anyone could destroy. Destroying was easy. But building something, protecting something, creating peace where there was war, that took real strength. That took courage. Any fool could pull a trigger. It took a wise person to lower the weapon. Vex thought about this for a long time. He had spent his whole life believing that warriors were the strongest. But maybe he had been wrong about what strength meant. The rescue mission launched at midnight. Yuna's team infiltrated the capital using Ashborn ships. The ships were designed to fly through volcanic atmospheres. The capital's defenses could not track them properly. They landed on the roof of the prison where Vecthar was held. The fighting was brief but intense. Karn's guards were well trained, but they had never faced human tactics combined with Ashborn ferocity. Yuna moved like water flowing around obstacles. The Ashborn moved like fire burning through resistance. Together they were unstoppable. They found Vecthar in a cell deep underground. He looked surprised to see humans coming to rescue him. Yuna stood at the cell door and looked at him. This was the being who had threatened to destroy her world, who had enslaved the Ashborn, who had caused so much suffering. She opened the door. She told him they were not doing this for him. They were doing it for the peace. For the future, for all the people who deserved a chance at something better. Vecthar nodded slowly. He understood. This was not forgiveness. This was not friendship. This was something more complicated. This was what had to be done. They fought their way back to the ships. Karn himself appeared to stop them. He was larger than Vecthar, covered in battle scars. He called Vecthar a coward and a traitor. He challenged him to single combat. But Vecthar refused. He said the age of solving problems through combat was over. He said there was a new way now. A better way. Karn could either accept it or be left behind by history. Karn roared in fury. He ordered his forces to attack. But then something unexpected happened. Many of his own soldiers refused. They lowered their weapons. Some even moved to protect Vecthar. These soldiers had families on the dying homeworld. They had seen the broadcast from Nexus Station. They had heard about humans offering to help save their planet. They had watched humans and ancient species working together to fix what was broken. They wanted that future. They wanted their children to grow up on a healthy world. They wanted to be remembered with something other than fear. Karn's promises of glory through conquest meant nothing if there was no home to return to. The rebellion collapsed without a single shot from the rescue team. Karn found himself alone, abandoned by his own forces. He was arrested by his own soldiers. The coup was over. Back on the homeworld, Dr. Hana made a discovery. The Thornwood botanists had found something in the soil. Ancient seeds, seeds that had been dormant for thousands of years, waiting for the right conditions to grow. These were native to the Draknir world before the terraforming. Thren looked at the seeds with wonder. His people had forgotten what their world looked like before. They thought the gray-green sky and black oceans were normal. They did not know they were living on a dying version of something that had once been beautiful. Hana told him these seeds could help restore the planet. Combined with Velshari technology and Thornwood knowledge, they could bring back what was lost. The Draknir homeworld could be green again. The oceans could be blue. The air could be clean. It would take time. Decades. Maybe generations. But it was possible. And more importantly, it would require the Draknir to work with other species. To learn cooperation. To become part of something larger than themselves. Ambassador Jiwoo watched all of this from Earth. She was coordinating efforts across dozens of worlds now. The old Galactic Council had dissolved. Too many species saw it as useless. It had stood by while the Draknir conquered. It had done nothing while species died. Jiwoo proposed something different. A confederation instead of a council. Worlds that actively helped each other instead of just watching. Species that shared resources and knowledge instead of hoarding them. It was a radical idea. Many species were skeptical. But 83 worlds expressed interest. 83 different species willing to try something new. It was a start. A small start, but a start nonetheless. The most surprising supporter was Counselor Mira. She had taken over leadership of the Draknir after Karn's failed coup. She saw the future clearly. The old ways led only to extinction. The new way offered survival. The choice was obvious. On a hillside on the Draknir homeworld, Thren and Dr. Hana planted one of the ancient seeds together. It was a symbolic gesture, but symbols mattered. Around them, Draknir children played. They were the first generation that would grow up knowing peace. Hana looked at the sky. Still gray-green. Still wrong. But she knew that someday these children would see blue. They would see their world healed. They would grow up in a galaxy that worked together instead of fought constantly. That was worth 17 years solving a puzzle. That was worth 7 years saving a star. That was worth 3 lives given to save Ashborn eggs. That was worth everything. The galaxy was changing. Slowly. Messily. Not everyone agreed with the changes. Not everyone wanted to cooperate. But change was happening nonetheless, and it had started because one species decided that helping strangers was more important than helping themselves. That kindness was stronger than cruelty. That the future belonged to those brave enough to build bridges instead of walls. The galaxy was learning what it meant to be human, and the universe would never be the same. 5 years had passed since the meeting at Nexus Station. The Draknir homeworld was slowly healing. The sky was still gray-green, but patches of blue were appearing. The black oceans had started to clear. In some places, you could see the bottom again. Dr. Hana stood on the same hillside where she and Thren had planted that first seed. Now it was a tree. Not large yet, but growing strong. Around it, a forest was starting to spread. Native plants returning after thousands of years. The land remembered what it was supposed to be. Thren stood beside her. He was different now. More confident. He had become the lead scientist for the restoration project. He worked with teams from 20 different species. He had learned to communicate with beings who looked nothing like him. He had learned that differences made you stronger, not weaker. Draknir children played in the new forest. They had never seen trees like this before. For them, this was magic. Their parents watched with tears in their eyes. They were seeing a world they thought was lost forever. Hana received a message on her communicator. It was from Ambassador Jiwoo. The Confederated Worlds was having its founding ceremony tomorrow. All representatives were requested to attend. Hana smiled. 5 years of work was finally becoming official. The ceremony took place on the same neutral station where the confrontation with Vekthar had happened. But now the station had been rebuilt and expanded. It was no longer just a trading hub. It was becoming the center of a new galactic community. Representatives from 83 worlds gathered. Some were humanoid, some were not. Some breathed oxygen, some breathed methane, some did not breathe at all. They were different in every way possible, but they were all there for the same reason. To sign the charter, to promise cooperation, to try something new. Ambassador Jiwoo had been elected as the first Secretary General. She stood at the podium, looking out at the representatives. She was older now, more gray in her hair, more lines on her face, but her eyes were bright with hope. She spoke simply. She said they were not creating a government. They were creating a family. Families argued. Families disagreed, but families helped each other. Families stood together when times were hard. That was what the Confederated Worlds would be. One by one, the representatives signed. Some used hands. Some used tentacles. Some used devices because they had no limbs at all. Each signature was different. Each one mattered. The Draknir representative was Counselor Mira. She had transformed her people's government from a military empire to a democratic council. It had not been easy. Many resisted, but slowly, the Draknir were learning a new way to exist. When Mira signed the charter, the room erupted in applause. 5 years ago, the Draknir had threatened to destroy Earth. Now they were joining a confederation based on peace and cooperation. If that could change, anything could change. After the ceremony, there was a memorial service. Major Yuna had organized it. It honored all those who had died in the conflicts before the peace. Humans and aliens, soldiers and civilians, everyone who had been lost. Yuna spoke about her 3 team members who died saving Ashborn eggs. Their names were carved on a memorial wall along with thousands of others. Ashborn warriors sang their ancestral songs. The deep voices filled the station with sound that you could feel in your bones. Draknir civilians who had opposed Karn's rebellion attended the service. They honored the humans who had saved Vekthar. They honored the Ashborn who had fought for peace. Former enemies grieved together. That was healing of a different kind. Captain Taeyang had a new job now. He commanded the Confederated Peacekeeping Force, a military made up of soldiers from dozens of species. They trained together. They learned from each other. They protected the Confederation from threats both outside and within. Officer Vek served as his second in command. The Draknir warrior had learned much from humans. He taught young soldiers that strength was not just about winning fights. Strength was about knowing when not to fight, about protecting instead of conquering, about building instead of destroying. Vekthar himself had retired from military service. He spent his time teaching Draknir history with uncomfortable honesty. He did not hide the mistakes his people had made. He did not pretend the Empire had been good. He taught the truth so that future generations would not repeat the past. Sometimes he met with Jiwoo privately. They were not quite friends. The wounds were too deep for that. But they had respect for each other. They had both changed the galaxy. They had both taken risks for peace. That created a bond even if it was complicated. Late one night, Jiwoo stood alone in her office. Earth was visible through the window. The blue planet that had started all of this. She thought about how far they had come. 5 years ago, Earth faced destruction. Now Earth was part of something larger, something better, but she knew the work was not done. Not all species had joined the Confederation. Some remained suspicious. Some still believed in the old ways of isolation and competition. Change took time, and there were new challenges coming. Her private communications network had detected something concerning. Long-range sensors at the edge of the galaxy showed unusual readings. Ships, lots of ships, coming from outside the galaxy itself. She had not told anyone yet. She wanted to gather more information first. But the readings suggested a fleet, thousands of ships, maybe tens of thousands, an armada from beyond their galaxy, heading toward civilized space. Jiwoo received a message on a private channel. It was from Elder Thos. The Velshari had detected the same readings. They were awakening more of their people from hibernation. The Ancient Ones were preparing for something. Another message came from an unknown source. The sender identified themselves as the Architects. They claimed to be observers even older than the Velshari. They had been watching the galaxy for eons, waiting for the right moment to make contact. The message was simple. They had seen what humanity did, how humans changed the galaxy through kindness and cooperation. The Architects approved, but they warned that harder tests were coming. The approaching armada was just the beginning. They offered knowledge, technology, guidance, but they also warned that using their help would change humanity forever. Jiwoo would need to decide if accepting was worth the cost. She sat in the darkness thinking. 5 years ago, she had made a choice to call for help. That choice had saved Earth, but it had also started a chain of events that changed the entire galaxy. Now she faced another choice, another moment that would shape the future. Boram entered the office. The girl was 17 now, no longer the child who had asked a simple question at Nexus Station. She was studying diplomacy. She wanted to follow in Jiwoo's footsteps. Boram asked if Jiwoo was worried about the future. The ambassador smiled and said yes, but she was not afraid. Fear came from facing the unknown alone, but Earth was not alone anymore. Messages of support were already coming in. The Velshari were preparing their world ships for defense. The Thornwood Collective was mobilizing their living forests. The Ashborn were sharpening their weapons and singing war songs. The Draknir military, now aligned with the Confederation, was readying its fleets. Dozens of other species were pledging support. Some Earth had helped directly. Others had heard the stories. They all understood one thing. They were stronger together than apart. That was the lesson humanity had taught them. Jiwoo stood and looked out at Earth one more time. Somewhere down there, children were learning in schools. Scientists were making discoveries. Artists were creating beauty. Ordinary people were living ordinary lives. That was worth protecting. That was worth fighting for. Whatever came from outside the galaxy would find something unexpected. Not scattered, frightened worlds. Not species fighting each other. They would find a confederation, a family, species that had learned to work together, to help each other, to stand as one. Boram asked if they would win against this new threat. Jiwoo thought about that. She thought about all the improbable things that had happened. Ancient species waking from hibernation. Empires choosing peace over war. Enemies becoming allies. Strangers becoming friends. She told Boram that winning was not guaranteed. Life never came with guarantees. But they had something the approaching armada might not expect. They had hope. They had friendship. They had the belief that working together could overcome any challenge. 5 years ago, High Commander Vekthar had demanded Earth's surrender. He expected easy victory over a weak, isolated species. Instead, ancient allies had awakened. The galaxy had changed. A new order had been born. Now a new threat was coming. But the galaxy was ready, not because they had the biggest weapons, not because they had the most ships, but because they had something more powerful. They had each other. Jiwoo activated the emergency communication network. She sent a message to every world in the Confederation. The message was simple. Something was coming. They did not know what yet, but they would face it together. As they had always done, as they always would, across the galaxy, species received the message. In Velshari world ships, in Thornwood groves, in Ashbourne forges, in Draknir command centers, in human cities on Earth. Everywhere, beings of every kind prepared,